Welcome to the 6th day of Police Technology Experience. This session is our case study panel discussion on video analysis, redaction, surveillance, and storage. I'm David Griffith, editor of Police Magazine, and I will be your moderator. If you have questions during these case studies, please submit them in our interface, and we will try to answer them at the end of each discussion. Before we get started, here is a message from one of our sponsors.
Thank you, David, and I would like to extend a thank you to all of our sponsors for their support and participation in bringing police technology experience to you all. I'd also like to invite everyone to join today's Innovative Solution Roundtable sessions that begin following this session at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific, and you'll be entered to win at a daily drawing for an amazing prize package from the Fesheimer Brothers Company giveaway. Today's prize is a Flying Cross quarter zip Justice sweater, a Vertex Spine Gray Delta Stretch 2.0 pant, and Vapor Core crew socks. And I'd like to announce and congratulate last week's winner, Ian Maxwell from Port Hueneme Police Department. Thanks and congratulations, Ian. I turn it back to you, David.
Thank you, Pamela. Our first case study is titled, How the Oregon Police Department Accelerates Evidence Redaction and Drives Transparency. It is sponsored by Veritone. Our speaker is Sergeant Jason Druckenmiller of the Oregon, Ohio Police Department. Sergeant Druckenmiller has served as a road officer, field training officer, and was a member of the Division Honor Guard. He was promoted in 2011 and was assigned as a shift commander until 2020, when he accepted an assignment supervising the communications section. He also oversees technology for the agency, including dash and body cameras, as well as the digital evidence platform. Sergeant Druckenmiller, please.
David, thank you for the introduction. It's always nice to hear all the things that you've done throughout your career. So I just want to thank you all for letting me present and give a little bit of information today. So as we go through this, just to give you a little background on my agency, it is the city of Oregon in the state of Ohio, so that often trips people up anytime I go anywhere and say I'm from Oregon Police. So Oregon is northwest Ohio, right on Lake Erie. We're a medium-sized agency, about 48 sworn officers and 14 civilian employees. We serve, stats say about 20,000 residents, but I'm sure we've grown. I think we're probably pushing 25,000. And we're about 28 square miles right on the Lake Erie shoreline. I've been very fortunate to work for a very progressive chief. Mike Navarre has been fantastic, and he actually came on as chief right about the same time I got promoted. Excuse me. So it's been a real joy working for him. He loves technology. He's not the most tech-savvy guy in the world, but he knows that it's the future of law enforcement and has really pushed our agency to be on the forefront of that in our area of Ohio. So his vision for us is really to be transparent with the public. He wants to build that trust between our agency and the community that we serve, and he knows that technology is going to be a driving force in our ability to do that. So it was really important for him to get out ahead of the big push into body-worn video and the capability and the obligation to get that video out to the public when it's appropriate for them to see that. So a little bit of background, the state laws have changed a lot, as I'm sure they have all over the country, and they're finally, at least in Ohio, addressing dash video and body-worn camera video. Up until a couple of years ago, there was no mention of it in the state law about whether it was a public record or was not a public record. And in the years that I've been going to training and talking to people about these things, it is handled very differently from state to state all across the country. I know there are some places that say, well, we withhold everything, we don't give anything out. There are other places that say we give everything. Luckily here in Ohio, the Ohio Revised Code now dictates what is and is not releasable, or what is and is not protected or restricted. But we are now, by law, required to release video whenever we have a request for it within the confines of that law. So the challenge for us was, how do we release that when we had no capability of redacting out the things that are protected? So this actually came up in a staff meeting at our agency, and the chief looked at me and he said, okay, how are we going to do this? And my answer to him was, well, chief, if we don't have the redaction capability, then we just withhold the video, because we can't risk releasing something that can't get out. And to his credit, he said that's not good enough. So if you can't find something, then I guess you can just hold a piece of paper up in front of your screen and videotape it with your cell phone, and just keep a piece of paper over top of whatever it is that needs to be taken out. Me being a tech guy, that is obviously not good enough for me, and I know that that isn't what he actually wanted me to do. He actually wanted me to go out and find a solution that was going to work. So that was our challenge, was to go out and find a product that was going to allow us to be on the forefront of this and be progressive and make sure that we're complying with all these requests, and that we weren't spending a ton of time doing it. So we were one of the first agencies in Ohio, or in our part of Ohio, to actually even have body-worn cameras on our officers, and we've been pretty lucky about staying on top of the technology to make sure that we're always on the forefront of that. So our chief, again, he wants to be ahead of the curve. He's always that guy that wants to be out in front and kind of set the standard for everybody else. He actually sat on a statewide advisory board for the governor to help put the legislation into place that drove all this. So I can't say enough good things about him and what he's done for our agency and kind of given us the opportunity to do. So it's been a great experience for me to learn going through this. So when it came time to actually decide on what we were going to do, I wanted to do kind of a bake-off, and I wanted to look at a couple different products and see what was going to work best. So we already use Covan Technologies as our digital evidence platform, and they do have a solution out there. We also looked at WatchGuard, and we looked at Veritone. So what I found is that Covan and WatchGuard run a very similar, if not the exact same engine in the background. So the software that actually drives the redaction is very, very similar. And Veritone runs a totally separate engine. So while Covan and WatchGuard, they have the same underlying engine, but a little different user interface that's customized for both of their products. So I only got a sample of the WatchGuard product, but I did get to see the Covan product in action at the last IACP conference before we did this bake-off. So what I did is I took one 10-minute video. It was just a traffic stop that one of our patrolmen made, where he just walked up, talked to the driver, and gave a verbal warning for the encounter. So it was just brief 10-minute contact with the public, and I ran it through both the WatchGuard software and the Veritone software, and I wanted to see how long it would take to pull out the things that are protected. For example, the driver's license of the operator of the vehicle can be seen in front of the officer's body cam, and the state of Ohio tells us that we can't release any personally identifying information of anybody who's not charged with a crime, so obviously we have to redact that license. Other parts of the conversation where she says her social security number to the officer, I had to make sure that that was taken out. So there were a few things that had to come out. And with the WatchGuard product, it took me about 1 hour and 20 minutes to get the whole redaction done from start to finish. With the Veritone product, it only took me about 25 minutes to get that done. And there's a few reasons that I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes as to why I think that went so much faster with the Veritone product. What I found with the Veritone product is the audio transcription is a big time saver in that. I knew at some point in that video she said her social security number, but rather than watching the 10-minute video to find out where in there she said it, I was able to just look at the audio transcript and I see a string of 9 numbers, and I know immediately that that is her social security number. And when it came time to take that out, for the audio transcription, all I literally had to do was just drag my mouse across those 9 numbers and tell the software to redact that, and it was done. I didn't have to go search frame by frame or watch the video and wait for it to come up. It was very easy to find. So I know that that's a time saver, not only in the instance of a social security number, but also any other sensitive information. It's real easy just to run a search if we know that a certain name came up or anything came up in the context of the conversation. We can run a search and go right to that point in the video and go and redact that information. The second big thing that Veritone had that really drew us to them was what they call their UDR, or their user-defined region tracking. So this is huge. If you've ever watched a body cam video and seen, even just when an officer is standing stationary and has an object in front of the camera, like a driver's license, for example, that driver's license is moving all over the frame, and sometimes into frame and out of the frame. And a lot of officers, just like I do, talk with their hands. So their hands are constantly moving in front of that camera, and that license is just all over the place. So in the other solutions, you have to manually track that item from place to place as it moves throughout the frame. With Veritone, I was able to draw a box around it once, and then from within the software, all I have to do is hold that box over top of it with my mouse while I'm advancing the video, and I can even advance it at half speed. And all I have to do is just hold my mouse pointer right on top of that. My box stays in place, and I track it as it moves throughout the video. When it goes out of frame, I can go ahead and close that UDR, and when it comes back in, I just create a new one, follow it around with my mouse, and the redaction is done. So the ease of use in the Veritone product was just way superior to the other products that we looked at. It certainly was a time saver and really helped us get through that a lot quicker. What I found in a couple of them, or actually when I tested the WatchGuard product, when you're looking at your screen, you can see a yellow box off to the left there. So this is a screenshot from the video that I used. It was after dark, and the officer is probably about 50 to 60 yards away from a gas station up there on the left. And what's inside that yellow box kept getting picked up by the other engine. And it was not picked up by the Veritone engine, but it was falsely picked up. We were getting a lot of these false hits. And even in talking with the other vendors, what we found is that sometimes hands were getting picked up as a false hit. Because of the way that the engine processed the video, there were certain things that it just took as a face or as a head, and it was looking for a specific pixel group, and it just kept picking up things that weren't included in it. So what that turned into is a lot of time spent trying to go back and pull out all those false hits. Now, in this specific example, that object that's outlined in yellow came up time and time again. Every time the officer's camera swung over to it and it came into frame, it came up as a false hit, and I had to go back in, select it, and remove it. And Veritone didn't provide that same problem. I didn't get nearly the same number of false hits. There were a couple here and there that hit that we didn't need, or they didn't have to come out, but it wasn't nearly the extent of the other products, and it wasn't repeatedly back and forth all the time. So that was a big, I guess, time waster in the other products, and time saver on the Veritone side, that I didn't have to spend so much time pulling those out. Also, from Veritone's interface, I can go in and say, okay, you've recognized all these objects, but you know what? I want to manually tell you which ones I want out and which ones I want kept in. So I can uncheck or unselect all of those redacted items, and then go through and say, I only want the driver's face taken out of this. And every time she's in frame, there is a checkbox, and all I have to do is check that checkbox, and it says, yep, that's the one I want to pull out of there. And if I don't check the box, then we're just going to leave that in the video. So rather than go through and pull out all the false hits, even if I have false hits with Veritone, I can uncheck it and move on and not spend any more time with it. Another place where I saw a lot of false hits was inside the patrol car. So the MDT screen, or our MDC screen, whichever you call it, a lot of times that information may be information about the return on the driver's license or the vehicle registration, and that's all protected information, can't be displayed. And it was not recognizing that as a protected area, but it was recognizing the stereo screen. So again, it was just a lot of that false hits. It was getting the dash-mounted radar as a false hit. So we spent a lot of time pulling out. We probably spent more time pulling out false hits than we did adding other things that needed to be taken out. And it was a lot of time wasted, where with the Veritone product, we didn't get the false hits to begin with, and we also didn't run into the repetitive nature of the false hits. With the Veritone product, we did also see a lot of detailed detection. So for example, in this screenshot, what I have outlined there in yellow is the rear view mirror on the passenger side of the vehicle, and that's our backup officer standing on the outside of the vehicle on the passenger side. So the Veritone product actually picked up that little face in the mirror, and even though I didn't need it redacted, it picked it up, recognized that it was there, and it at least alerted me to the fact that that piece was there and gave me the option whether I wanted to take that out or not. So it makes sure that I know what's there and what can come out, and that it did detect a face. Even if I don't have to pull that face out, it's letting me know that it's there so that I can evaluate whether or not that needs to come out. And this is another shot of a similar incident. This is actually when the officer was walking back to get in his car. This is his face actually reflecting off the side of the vehicle, and it did detect that and pick that up as a potential redaction point. So there was a lot of advantages to the Veritone product that really kind of sold it. And the last one that I don't have a slide in here for was the difference in the actual platform and how it's hosted. The WatchGuard and the Covan platform are on-premise platforms where you have to have a PC that has the specs that are appropriate to run the video editing and the software that it takes in order to drive this engine. The Veritone product is a online product where I'm able to just upload the video and it gets processed on their end, on their server. And once it's ready to go, then I can go in and start to do my redaction. So I don't have to maintain any equipment on my end. As long as I have an internet connection and I can get to it, then I'm able to complete that redaction without needing any special hardware or software on my end. So that is my brief little presentation about Veritone and our bake-off for video redaction. And I'll turn it over to David if there's any questions for me.
Thank you, Sergeant Druckenmiller. Yeah, we have a few questions. Was it legislation that forced your agency's hand to be more transparent, or is it because your agency tends to be more progressive about these kinds of things?
It was a little bit of both. Like I mentioned, the Ohio Revised Code, and if anybody's actually interested in seeing it to see what their state has, the Ohio Revised Code section 149.43 is the actual section that labels out our restricted body cam video for things like the depiction of a nude body, the death of any individual as long as it wasn't caused by law enforcement, personal protected information that might identify victims of domestic violence, for example. So there was a little bit of both in that.
Okay. Given your experience with leveraging AI for video redaction, do you see your agency in the future using more artificial intelligence-based solutions?
I'd love to see that happen. I know that there's another Veritone product out there we've talked to them about. We spend a lot of time putting suspect photos out on Facebook to try to get the community to help us identify these individuals. For example, if they go into our local Walmart and steal something and we don't know who they are, they got away, we put their photo out on Facebook to see if anybody knows them. I know that there's an AI solution from Veritone that they could speak on that will actually run that facial recognition across our booking photos. And it would be a great idea, I think, to investigate that and see if that would work for our agency. So I definitely see AI coming into play more and more in the future to save time and save cost.
You believe that that tool would make your agency more efficient, save cost and resources?
I certainly do, and I think it also goes into the public trust in that we're not putting a lot of suspects out to the public before we have them identified. So I think that serves a lot of purposes by using that AI to solve those issues.
All right. Thank you very much, Sergeant Druckenmiller.